Hey, Charlie, how's it going?
Good. I got a quick question for you.
Yeah.
So you're looking at the dashboard, and we threw up that first grid that has a chart. So mine happens to be a line chart. The one that Chris did ends up happening to be columns. If I like the column better than the line chart, can I go back to, would I just simply go back to that original report, change the style of it from a line chart to a column chart, and when I reopen the dashboard, would it change it automatically?
Yes, as long as it's totally saved. Because what the dashboard really is, even the reports to a certain extent are kind of these windows into a data set, into something existing. So with the dashboard, you're really taking a window and painting that window into the report part that you made. That's an element of your report, and you're kind of creating a few of those windows together. So the idea with the reports is to take one data set and then you can create a few different report parts that show the different ways of demonstrating that data. And then the dashboard is a way of kind of aggregating a few different report styles together into a single place. But you never have to update the dashboard manually. It'll always get re-updated from whatever the most recent report changes.
That's kind of what I thought. I figured it was just grabbing a snapshot of whatever the latest version of however the last report was saved.
Yeah, it's literally just an aggregating together a few different reports that are currently in the system.
Okay.
And Chris is going to show a few more things to do with the dashboards before we move on to other stuff. So, was there any other questions for those hanging out?
But the one thing I do want to note, today's session has been phenomenal. I've been able to keep up with them along the whole problem. There's never been a problem with audio lag or video lag at all. It's been, I mean, we're talking night and day difference from Friday.
Yeah, I'm sure that's due to, I would say mostly it's probably due to the laptop, but the changing technology, I mean, Teams is what we wanted to do originally anyway, and we felt like there were some issues with Chris's computer that wasn't going to let that happen. We got that resolved over the weekend, so I'm glad that everything is much better. This is what we expect from a training that we normally deliver, and I think the Friday product wasn't exactly what we're used to delivering for you guys. So
yeah, that was yeah. I kind of figured a fair amount of it was the laptop itself, but yeah. Just for me, it was just we're talking night and day difference.
Yeah, really glad that got figured out for you. Okay, and Herbert, to answer your question about corral data, so basically in production, so basically corral syncs data from POSSE on regular intervals. Obviously, what you're looking at in test is a snapshot of any new data from July 2020. So there will be hardly anything since that point, because anything after that point is test data. But in production, you'll notice that data in corral doesn't get updated until about a minute afterwards, because it syncs about every minute. So if anything new gets created, it takes a minute or two for corral to get fully updated with whatever stuff was just changed a few minutes before. And yeah, so I mean, I think it's even noticed something like Charlie with the inspectors and stuff. Like if they run their inspectors report right after putting a process in, it might not always appear with their most recent, like inspection that they completed or something, because it's still taking a moment to acquire that new data from the database. So.
Yeah, it does. So if we do, especially if we do alterations to the mileage log, if we make a change in the mileage log data, we have to wait about a minute, maybe a little bit more sometimes, for the report to pick that change up.
Yeah. So that's what's happening in the background.
So I saw an email note that I got from Andy a couple of days ago, because this happens to us every once in a while, where the inspectors can't see their daily activity reports. And Andy made a comment about the corral sync. What is that? What is it doing that it's preventing that viewing?
So it's the same thing we're talking about. Just occasionally the corral sync will get caught on something. Like if there's a big change in the database, sometimes that corral sync will take forever, because I mean, I think it happened when we initially installed POSSE Web the very first time, because we had tons of problem with syncing, because it updated every single TMK. So it was syncing all of those into corral at the same exact time, and that took a long time, and we should have actually resolved that much sooner than we did. But so occasionally there is something like that that just takes a really long time, and it means that corral is way behind where it should be, and then inspectors don't see what they're hoping to, or an error happens in corral and they don't see it. So that was what happened the last time. So that's why we try to keep an eye on corral every single morning to make sure that your syncs are coming in correctly. But
okay. So if we do get to issues where we can't see daily reports, is that just an email that I need to send to you guys, or do I need to go through Jim?
We typically get emails, like the corral database itself actually sends us emails if there's an error or something like that. Feel free to email Jim, but probably just email Jim and us at the same time, like CC Jim or CC us or whatever, because Jim should know about those things as the support staff, but it will go directly to us anyway, and we'll be able to support you right away as well. So
okay, all right, thanks.
Yeah.
All right, good discussion on corral. And it is very important to know where your data is coming from, when you should expect it there. So like it. I'm guessing everybody is back and we're ready for the last 54 minutes together, and we'll try to make this as useful as possible. If you have any hanging questions that you've been wondering, please go ahead and just start asking them. Let's not wait until it's the end of the day to get those out. So I definitely want to address those. We're going to kind of this last 54 minutes together, 53 minutes now. We're going to take a look at, again, polishing reports a little further. So we're going to end by looking at a building report that's already in production and take a look at how it's structured, the different report parts, some of the pieces that really help it get there. We won't worry so much about what data is coming into it or exactly what is being displayed, but we'll more focus on how it's being displayed there. Before that, we'll finish off right now. We'll switch over and talk about the dashboard. I'm going to show my screen. That's already happening. We'll talk about the dashboard that we had just created and played around with. We'll take a look at the presentation mode here. So I'm going to click back into the dashboard. I made a few modifications just to pull these pieces together. I deleted one of the report parts. Again, this dashboard doesn't have the design or thought that it should go into a dashboard. This is just showing that a dashboard is a collection of report parts. It is just referencing existing reports that you have created. So if you change those reports, they will be displayed. Those changes will come through here as well.
That was a question Charlie had earlier, so I don't know if everybody heard that, but yeah, if you want to change any one of these pieces, all you have to do is go change that original report, and all the dashboard is a window on that existing report. So any changes you make there will appear here right away.
Absolutely. Well said. We're going to go into presentation mode. You see up here again, the same thing we had with reports. We have the ability to change who can access this. When is this scheduled to be emailed out or delivered, and how is it going to be delivered? How we can jump back in and edit this report, print it, export it. So let's talk for a moment about export. We said, hey, earlier, if we got this to a place it's now in production, people are using it, we consider this a stable version, go ahead and export the definition. I would create either for your division or altogether just a place that you keep these exports of the definition. So in case any of them are deleted or corrupted in any way, or you just need to go back to a different version, you can do that here and have that available. Email,
and technically with those exports, you would have to provide them to Computronix to load back into the database if we needed to restore to one of those copies, because that has to happen from an administrator. But you can certainly keep those copies by yourself just in case we need to restore an older version or completely, add the report into a different environment or whatever that looks like. So.
Well said. And that makes it much simpler. It's much simpler to upload that than it is going to be to recreate what all the work you had already done. Okay, so I'm going to click on this far left button is presentation mode. And this is what your viewer, if they're coming here, this is what your viewer is going to see. So I can slide through these pieces. And I can scroll down and I can, if I need to go through this, so that functionality of your report still remains for each one of your reports. And I'm going to go to the next part and the last part, which is this gauge. I can also expand this to full screen mode as well. I can exit out of that mode. So there's the expansion, exit, and same per report. You can also click that full screen mode as well. If I had filters, I could modify those filters for each one of these, or I'm sorry, for the group. Okay. So I'm going to head back to reports now, and we'll take a look at a few things we kind of glossed over that are definitely a part of finishing up a report to get where you would like it. I'm going to go back to my ADU summary chart that we just created together. And for this, I'm going to go in and edit the design. In here, one thing that would make this much more helpful is if I could see the legend. Why are these what color? I'm going to change the preview to all. Just another part of making sure this is ready. I don't want to be narrowing down my results for anybody. I'm going to go to the report parts, and I actually need to, I think, step into configuration to be able to change that. So let me get down here into the body of my report and get to the top of my report part. Excuse me, just scrolling around. Step into configuration, and now I get this menu. So I'm in configuration of this report part, not of the complete report itself, but of this part, because I could have multiple parts. And I'm going to go down. I'd like to see legend. Here we go. Settings. So this is going to open up my legend menu. And I would like all I'm really doing here is clicking that I want my legend to be available. So now we have all those pieces coming out. I can decide where I want to be available at, horizontal alignment, vertical alignment. So for me, these solutions work. I can check center. I want it at the bottom. I want it at the top. I want it at the middle. So the middle center is not going to work well. Maybe I want it on the right-hand side, but this preview isn't showing an exact preview of what happened. It would push further off to the right. But I'm going to go back to center and bottom. And this is another way to make this report a little bit more helpful, even quicker. Do I want a border around this? Sure. What color do I want? What thickness do I want it? What text style? So for anything that you see in text, you can modify it. You need to get to the right place, but you can modify your text in any place, and you might be able to modify the alignment of your text as well in most cases. So I'm going to save this in, and now I'm just another step closer to having a completed report part 2. Any questions on the legend? Do we want to take a little time for each of you to go in and add a legend? If you do, go ahead and just speak up, and we can take a few minutes right here and do that as well. Okay, we'll move on to another piece of work. I'd like to go back and take a look at a report we did yesterday. And for a moment, I'm going to just take over Kalani's report.
And I think one thing to note also, the scaling is always going to be, it's going to try to base like your Y scale on those charts based on what the highest and lowest amounts of data are to show all the data at the same time. There are tools for changing that scale as well if you wanted to see it within a particular context of 1,000 permits or whatever is important there. But normally I feel like for most cases, the default of letting it scale to the amount based on what's there typically works pretty often, but occasionally you might want to change those because you have a particular idea of the values you want to compare to.
Agreed. Thank you, Sam. All right, building permits with plan reviews. So I'm going to head down and find that. I could also use my search and just start typing in plan review. That can help highlight. In addition, it can help narrow. So we'll just say I'm using my teammates' work here, and Kanani did a great job on this. And I'm nowhere, my report's nowhere near as well done as hers. So this is going to load. We're going to look at a few things here. We're going to look, one thing we're going to take a look at is the custom URL. This allows us to link, this could allow you to link to just about anything, but in this case, we're going to look at linking back into POSSE. So being able to take a look here, and if you see something that you want to know more about, then you can also click in and link back to POSSE and go check out what's going on with that job or with that process, whatever the case may be. So we're not going to fully polish off this report, but we're just going to look at a couple things. So custom URL is one. We're going to take a look at a grand total for jobs, and then we're going to take a look at a subtotal for processes. So being able to add these things in that, again, help you quickly recognize what's going on or the information you're looking for. I'm going to go in and edit this. So edit, design.
Now, I will also point out, that Chris and I and others, as administrators, we have the ability to go in and edit these reports, particularly because they're all within that same training category. But if you would save this report to the CSD group in production, no one else from other divisions would be able to go in and edit this other than other administrators. It would be limited to those in CSD, which I think is only Kanani at this point. So
if you're following along with this, you don't need to be, but you certainly can. I'm going to add into the chat this link that I'm going to be putting in as a custom URL. You know what? Yeah, some highlighting that makes it almost unreadable. So let me remove that highlighting.
right, and what Chris is trying to solve here is a general problem that you come to with ad hoc, in that while it's great for reporting, there's typically no direct way to just click on a row and pull up that particular building permit or that particular process or whatever in POSSE the way you could with a search or something like that. So this is actually a way of working around that by creating a link that goes directly back into POSSE and shows you the particular row based on the job ID. And I'm just going to copy that here in a second, but that allows you to turn what is normally just a report into something kind of interactive that you can actually use to take yourself to POSSE and do further research on things that stand out to you from the report list. Have I stalled long enough for you to get that into the chat, Chris?
Almost. My typing is a little slow here for that.
And I can add it too if you just want to keep showing what you're doing here. I can grab that.
No, I have it, and I can show you essentially what I'm doing is we have a base URL. So taking this http posse test.honolulu.gov.posseweb test, and then adding in a POSSE object ID, and then we're going to bind the job ID as that object ID that it's going to go to. So back to here, and let me, now that I've typed it out, got rid of any formatting, and I'll test it out first to make sure that I'm going to the right place. But essentially what we're going to do is I'm going to come down to edit my report part and go into my report part. So I want this hyperlink to show up on the application number. So right here is where I want the hyperlink to be showing up. I want this to be kind of that blue with an underline look to it. So I'm going to go down to my separators. This is the application number, and I'm going to select that. For this, I'm going to go up to field properties. Now that I've clicked on application number, I'm going to click on more. I would like to see more options, please. Custom URL. I'm going to click in here, and then I'm going to add this in. So essentially, I am binding in the job ID, which is the underlying name of that detail, or excuse me, is not the underlying name of the application number, but we have also added in job ID into the separators, and we made it invisible for this reason. We need it in that row to be able to access it for this operation right here. So we're going to have it show as a link, or we could also have it show as one of these types of links that you can click on. So I'm just going to have it be a little more basic and show as that blue with the underlining, and click OK. So here now the whole row is, I can click and it'll take me out to POSSE, and we'll get to see that in just a moment.
And I guess so a couple things here. First of all, the reason that works, that we can kind of put that job ID at the end of that URL and take us to things, is because POSSE has a built-in function that allows you to open any jobs, processes, or objects based on that ID. Not every system, you can't necessarily link to everything that way or anything that way, but POSSE does have that built-in functionality, and that's what we're taking advantage of. A second thing, so Don had a question. Don, can you maybe come off mute and explain exactly what you're talking about with the emails? What were you hoping Ad Hoc could do there?
Okay, well, we generate an automatic email after, like say, an IBP is created. Can we change that? I mean, is it, or even like, I think building permit, they have automatic emails they send after the review is completed.
Yeah, so no, Ad Hoc wouldn't affect any of those particular emails. Those are built inside of POSSE database and not necessarily in something that's accessible by Ad Hoc. If there needs to be updates to those emails, or you need the ability to modify those emails occasionally, we certainly can make those changes if you needed to submit a GIS work request about getting some updates to those emails or having the ability to update those emails, we can certainly look at that, but that wouldn't be related to ad hoc at the moment.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, workflow from POSSE is not tied in to kick off any ad hoc reporting. So that's still extra reports that fulfills that piece. All right, so we have our job ID here. That's what's allowing me to tie that in. If we were on an object, I would have bound in object ID instead of job ID into my expression, my custom URL expression. I'm gonna move on. I want to create a grand total count of each job that is included here. So I'm gonna select my application number again, and in my field properties, I can scroll down under date formatting to grand total and go ahead and click on that. And then I'm just gonna select a count distinct. I could also select a count. This should already be listing out only one job. It's not listing out the job over and over. It's going to say this is data type numeric. I could add in my formatting here. So no decimals necessary. I do want a comma if it's over 1,000. And I could also add in a label, grand total label. So let's just call it job grand total. And click OK. So we'll get to see where that shows up. We added a grand total for the job. I would also like to add a grand total for the processes. So we have process ID on here. It is not visible. So we can use that in account here for the processes. So we're gonna have it come over here at the outcome. So what I'm trying to do is I want the subtotal to align with the outcome column. I don't want the subtotal over under the created date, but I'm going to do my count over here. So I'm gonna go down. Once I've selected outcome, in my field properties, I see subtotal. I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to actually insert an expression here because I don't want to count the number of outcomes. I actually want to count the process ID. So here, it's already has this is the recommendation or example text that already puts in, but I'm going to type in counts, or I'm going to attempt that 3 times, counts, and then in brackets, or even better than brackets, I can select what I want to count. So I want to count my process ID. So it adds it in brackets, meaning that is bound in there. We're going to want this to be numeric. And again, we'll have no decimals. You do not have permission to view this report. I don't believe that's true, but let's see what happens. I'm just going to click OK. Okay. So,
does it need the fully qualified thing that comes from the data source and then the report name and then the process ID?
I don't believe it does. It could, but I think it would. So this needs to be within the row itself. So that's why we're trying to use the process ID from not the report itself, but from the columns, or excuse me, the rows we're placing in. So let me see. There should be no difference between those two. And I might just have to let this go if I'm not going to get it here. But trying to say, we can also take a count of the processes, and you can have subtotals, a grand total for everything, subtotals for your processes, and you can have two different counts here.
Do you want to explain
out
briefly? I think, do you want to explain briefly the concept of why you used count distinct on the first one? Because I think that's an important difference as to what we're counting there and why there are two totals.
Okay, absolutely. So count distinct means that it's going to look at everything, every one of these rows. And if any of the rows are the exact same, then it will not count the additional rows. So if I have 3 that are of object ID 111, it's going to see those 3 and it's only going to count 1 because that is a distinct object ID as itself. It's not going to count any times that it's repeated in the data set. All right, so at this point, I'm going to save it. We're going to go to Report Viewer. We're going to see our grand total. We're also going to see our hyperlink and use that to get over to POSSE. All right, so our hyperlink is coming through. We'll test that out here to make sure. Right now, we have a job grand total for application number of 46. And again, I could work on the reformatting of this. What's coming through here is this is what this is currently called and how it's formatted.
Chris.
Yes.
That job grand total of 46 is 46 what?
So that should be 46 jobs. Now, off the bat, that doesn't sound correct. And we can look at a few things. 1, our preview records is 100. 2, I don't currently know what's in my date. Okay, there we go. I have from 2019 through when test was updated in 2020.
Yeah,
so this is currently a count.
Yeah, so I was currently looking at, so I guess this is kind of what I was getting at earlier as well. And this is where it gets kind of, you can get kind of tripped up a little bit with some of these counts and values once you start looking at kind of the split data set. Because what we have for our data here is we have jobs, and then we also have a relationship to all of these processes. And there can be a lot of processes for every job if there's a lot of reviews on that particular job. So what it's going to mean is that when we were previewing only 100 records, that means it's found 100 processes. But of those 100 processes, there's about 46 distinct jobs that we found because there were some jobs that had lots of processes on them. So when we're counting that grand total of jobs or application numbers, it's actually counting 46 distinct applications that are found within that data set. With there being 100-ish rows, and those 100 total rows come from the processes that were found underneath. So that if we had counted the processes themselves, it would be a much higher number because it would have been counting the number of total reviews which is a much higher number than the number of distinct jobs. So understanding the relationship between that data and why there's lots of rows here and less rows over here is kind of what's happening there to get those distinct numbers.
Thank you, Sam. And that is exactly it.
And I'm happy to go into more detail about that kind of stuff later. We don't have a ton of time to really have a great long debate about data science and what it looks like to join data sources and stuff. But certainly if you're curious as we go, I can help to address as many of those things as possible.
Chris, the hyperlink that you created, will that work in reports? Will it also work in dashboard too?
Yes. Yep. So again, the dashboard is just pointing to. So the dashboard still has all the functionality for that report part. Nothing is stripped out. Nothing is different. It's just been, you've added it in there. So yes, good question.
Yep, and technically that link would still work even if you exported the report to like a PDF. It would still be there. You could technically link from it. The links still only work if you're within the city's network. So if you sent that to anyone else, they wouldn't be able to go see it. But as long as you opened the link from within the city's network, you could put that in a PDF or an email or anything else.
Yep. And then you just need to confirm, if you're in test, this is your base URL. If you're in production, your base URL is different. We'll need to either provide that for you or build it out and confirm that that's the correct base URL for production. Okay, let's go take a look at the building report in production and just kind of comment on it, take a look at what is making this a completed report, and hopefully just kind of mulling over ways that you can apply some of what you've learned to reports that you'll be creating in the future. And that is something I do quite often when I go to do a report. If I've seen this done somewhere else, a little piece of it done somewhere else, and I really liked how it was done, I will go over and review how it's done and grab anything I can from that to bring into the report that I will be creating. We haven't taken a look at this, but we can dive in here and see that there's a URL that the service is going out and grabbing this image and bringing it in to our header. So we also have right now, we have a filter with date completed. It's already preset and bringing in the first half of 2020. Right here, I'm seeing the title. I'm also seeing a description that's providing us some further information. We're currently still loading this first report part. The second one has already reloaded. So that is another piece of being able to see different report parts side by side to give you more of an overview or a better picture of something. Our third report part also coming in, you're seeing legends are used here. We have the diagonal for the month and the year coming in. Because my user currently has year before month, that's how I'm viewing this. But if your user, you have gone back in and saved month, day, year, then that's what your user will be seeing right now, or what you will be seeing. Excuse me. So again, this is cleanly displayed. Having for each one of these that title and description. So I'm kind of just reiterating a few things that I think are helpful for each one of your reports you're going to do.
And do you want to show being able to toggle the values in the separators there? And so on this reviews completed by plans reviewer, you'll see there's a lot of different plans reviewers there. So it's kind of messy and hard to view some of that data. If you can actually go down and click and toggle each of those values in the select below, and that usually, assuming, does that work, Chris? Because at least you can do it on the report part. Yeah, it does work here too. Great. So you can actually select and remove some of those values from
right
the
now,
overall data
each
set.
one I click, I'm removing.
Yes. So you kind of have to limit down to the ones you might only be looking for. So we could limit to just look at the STD ones. We could look at just people in plans review or building or whatever that looks like. But you can, anytime you get a legend like this, you can actually remove or add back in the values that are pertinent to what you're trying to look for. And that's not changing the data at all. Ooh, Kanani's back in.
It's just changing what you are currently showing.
So if you wanted to alter that a little bit, so like on your ones where you're just looking out there, you had the plans reviewer. So if you have them, right now they're just listed by name. So if you wanted that to say, show what discipline it was. So like Paul Lee would be a building plans reviewer, and Franklin Lung would be NPDS or stormwater quality reviewer. Would that be a GIS work request to alter that?
Yes, it would be.
Okay.
So I'll answer that question because we've addressed this a few times. So there's a few different ways you can understand what group someone is a part of. And it's very much something that has to be kind of configured into the back of POSSE to completely get that to work. So right now, like in the data set, there's nothing that says this reviewer is clearly a part of this group. There's nothing that you can report on right now in Corral that says that Paul Lee is a buildings reviewer, at least not easily accessible. So a GIS work request could be submitted to make that an easier column to sort on, but that would have to be based on like an access group that they're in or some other list somewhere. So we would have to figure out exactly how you're determining what group they're a part of, because that could change a lot based on various factors and where people get moved around to and stuff. So we would have to have a broader conversation about how we're determining that. But yes, it is something we could certainly add if you submitted a GIS work request and we had a conversation about it.
Could you do the same thing with filters?
The same, what, sorry?
So if you wanted to say in Charlie's request, he just wanted to see, half a dozen guys, could he just filter by those guys? I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't create a view by the groups or whatever, but that would work as well, yeah, if you wanted to do it that way.
Yes. So yeah, you could also, so another way you could make that data more, something that the viewer can modify and look at instead of pulling it out in the legend there. You could create a filter on that report that allows you to select multiple reviewers, and you would select all their names from that list, and it would allow you to then choose which reviewers you wanted to see and which ones you didn't. That kind of depends on whether or not you wanted that filter to affect the entire data set. So if you're on this report, there's 4 total report things, and the filter would affect all of them if it was, because it's the same data set for all 4. So if that's what you want, then you can change it at a global level from that filter. But if you wanted to have the user just be able to select on that particular report part, what we have here is what you would use there. It's a little nuanced, but yeah.
Any other questions at this point? Okay. Well, we do have a few more minutes left, and there is always, again, this tool has a ton of depth, so there's always more to show. There's one more thing that I would like to show, and so I'm going to head out to reports. I'm going to go to LUPD created jobs. Let's see. If I can find one that I was working on. Probably could grab any of yours, and some I know would be further along. But here, we will jump into our design, and then we will go into configuration mode. And what I'm heading off to do is I want to create a drill down. A drill down is just a little different from a subreport. Both of them, essentially, you click on the data, and it takes you into this particular data set. So it's very easy to see with a column graph here that if I click on this, this is the only data I'm going to be seeing. So I'd be really limiting the created date to this time period. And what I'm going to do that is I need a subset of data for what we call a drill down. A subset is, well, here we have the LUPD jobs. So job type is a subset. This is something that each one of these that are counted here has a job type. So we could simply create a drill down, and this is pretty neat functionality. Again, it has to set up correctly in the data that you have a set of data, and then you have a subset that is always there for that data. So I'm going to take the job type description and add that in here. So nothing really appears that it changed here, but once I click on this, I can now go in and see each one of the job types. So this is creating a drill down, which is really just a sub-report, but a specific type of sub-report. It is a subset, really. It allows that to come together. So over here, you'll see what subset it's taking a look at. So it's taking a look at July from 2020, and here are all the counts and each job type listed out for us. If I want to go back, so let me save this so we can see it in the report viewer. And I'm just going to grab different month, or excuse me, I'm not quite in the report viewer. So again, we have our set for 2020. Let me grab different month. And here we are. Still stuff to clean up with this report, but want to show you what a drill down does. Any questions on this? I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to go back into my configuration, and I'm going to show this a little differently. So this is the adding a sub-report doesn't have to have a particular setup of data, so it's much easier to do. So in here, I can go in and on my y-axis, I have field properties, and I can click on more. And then for my, excuse me, I'm expecting to see something else. So
is that an advanced report creator function?
I don't think it should be, or I don't know it as a, there we go. Excuse me, I'm just in the wrong place. I need to be on the x-axis because that's really the range of data that's being allowed in. So I need to click on more here for field properties, down to sub-report. And then I would actually need to have another report created that is that I can select from here. So this is saying sub-report filters, inherit filters from current report. So as this is selected, I have no other reports currently made with the same filters. Let me see if I can search for and find any reports that I can add to this. Okay, so again, I'm just going to add in a completely unrelated report by Lori and style. We're going to have this open in a new window, or we could have it open as a pop-up. I'll just select pop-up for the fun of it. So now here you see that we have hyperlinks for each place that there is data. I also unchecked that we're not passing along our filters. Most likely you want your filters to be connected so that the data that comes up is again being narrowed down to what you've already narrowed this down to. So poor example, but just very much showing the tools of connecting one report to another, so that you can get more information out of this. Another actually more useful example would be going from here to something like our building plan reviews. So if you had an LUPD version of that, then that's what would come up. And no, I'm not going to do that. So now this could be a way to dive deeper into this. On that same level, just giving lots of options, you could also just put these report parts next to each other so you can see more of a big picture and then get more information as you go. This is loading. I'm just going to click OK. And do we have any questions at this point? We are pretty much wrapped up for the day. And any thoughts you want to share or any questions you'd like to ask? All right, Jim, I'm gonna call on you. Jim, do you want to share anything for the day? How did today go for you?
Well, I have to agree with Charlie. I thought that things went a lot smoother in teams, so that was good. I mean, for me, like the big picture is I'm still kind of, I think we're still going to have some internal discussions about, okay, this is cool. The bigger picture is going to be, what kind of, how are we going to apply this? I mean, I could see how in some sections having the metrics is handy, but I mean, as the guy who's just sitting here, looking at a Swiss Army knife, some of the utility, people are going to have to come to me and say, I need this. And it's going to take some research to figure out, how we can give them what they need. But that's kind of where I'm kind of left with my 1,000-mile stare is the use cases as to how we're going to, scrape through the data and, who's this going to be targeted for, and, being careful not to grab the wrong column and give them just a rosy picture or whatever. I mean, that's where I see us, having the most pain points moving forward.
Understood. And I think you're seeing this very well. Yes, it is a tool, and what can we do with this next? And also recognizing that the design is the most challenging point. This is a really good tool for, all right, you have a need in your department, and then you're connecting the functionality to that need in the design, and that's very much the hardest part to get past. And part of that, right, is, okay, well, we have the need, we have the functionality, do we have the data? And you're already referencing that as well. So do we need to go research where exactly that comes from? Yep. Do we need to add it into Corral? Yep. Or nope, if it's already there. Yeah, those are tough steps. And I think the more you do this, the more each one of you will get used to those steps.
Yeah, and I think I'll add on to that as well to kind of address Jim's question. The way I mean, obviously ad hoc can be used for a ton of things from huge level. I even think new versions of ad hoc are looking at things like projections and doing future casting and that sort of thing based on previous statistical data and even AI in that regard, all the way down to really refined. I just want to see a list of these 10 object IDs so I can go look at them kind of thing. So, like it's possible to use it for all of those different functions, and it's almost really hard to imagine what some of those things might be just looking at some of these functions and trying to imagine how they would apply to you guys. So the way that you guys use it now and the way you guys might use it in 5 years could be completely different. I would say it's a lot of it's going to be based on what administration wants, what your managers and division chiefs are looking for. As the report designers, they might be saying, hey, I need more statistics on how people are performing, and we'll look at doing that. Or they might say, hey, I want to have more lists of, permits that are, behind schedule or something like that. And we'll we'll start taking more looks at that sort of thing, or I just want more totals on stuff. So that's going to change all the time. But knowing what those possibilities are and what the capabilities of the product are is what's going to help you be able to focus it in the direction of what's going to best help your guys' business. And as you run into things in the next, month, year, whatever that looks like, and you realize, oh, hey, actually it might be really helpful to have a report like that, we can always take a look at how we can make ad hoc work for you guys based on your requirements and stuff. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
So your manager gives you an idea of what they're looking for, and just to be on the safe side, you want to work in the POSSE test platform to kind of create this and refine it. So you work at it and work at it and work at it, and you come out and you work all the bugs out of it till you get what you really want and what the manager really wants. Can you then copy that into production to make it work?
Yes, absolutely. So when Chris showed briefly that export definition thing that we talked about for saving a local version of your report once you're done, that's how it would be done, and that's how we take those and copy those forward into the production environment. As a general rule of thumb, though, actually ad hoc is designed to not have to necessarily build in the test environment. You can build live in production, and that is not necessarily a bad thing. You can test on your live data, get everything squared away until you're good to go, and then send that report or schedule that report for your manager or whatever that looks like. So there's not really any issues with making your report live in production and testing it on test data, on live data. Chris, do you want to show briefly the access page at the end of some of these reports we've created so that we can kind of point out what that's going to look like and how they can limit who's seeing it as they go?
Absolutely. So Charlie, here's that definition, and then yes, we'll go to the access page, which will mean, hey, if you're currently in development on this, maybe you're limiting the access just to report creators for your division or whomever. And then once you're ready to go live, how do you change that access? So let's step into a report. And I'm going to go to design. And then we're going to be going to our left-hand column. So I'm going to expand this out just so we can see the wording too: design, format, exporting, schedule, access. Now, we set the default access for each one of these roles so this was created by the BD report creator. And these are the default access roles that people can see. So we have administrator, we have an advanced report creator, and then for the viewer, the BD report viewer, they can also see this, but they can only view this. And then for each one of these, they can fully access this. If I want to add sharing, you'll get used to in the email location, the schedule location, the access location, you get used to this. So I want to add everyone. I want to add a particular role or a particular user. So let's select a user in this case and make sure that Charlie, and we're still, this is the parking lot issue we took yesterday, but I should be able to just search Charlie, click on your name down here, and add you in with a certain amount of rights if I wanted to be that specific about who was being able to see this.
Yeah, so basically my idea with that is if you have something in development and you just don't want anybody looking at it while you're building it in production, you can certainly come in here and just take that action button on the right, delete whoever you need to off of this, and then once you can add their access back in once you're ready to show it to everybody. So you can certainly limit that so that no one's seeing your reports that haven't necessarily been finished yet. And everybody got chopped out and back in. Okay, does that answer your question, Charlie?
It does. That, because that was kind of one of those things where I was kind of concerned if there was something that we would do that may, inadvertently produce an error in the database. But this is actually just reporting off of a database versus actually inputting anything into it.
Yeah, so it's very safe, especially since the database is separate from the POSSE database. So you're not gonna break anything. Chris, do you have the survey into the chat?
I will add the survey into the chat. Thank you for that, Sam. Always on top of it.
Because I know you need to leave here pretty soon, Chris. So I'll stay on and address as many questions as I can right now, but I wanted to make sure we get that out to people before.
So I'm going to add the survey into the chat. Maylene, I wanted to ask, how was your day? How did everything go? What were your thoughts?
I basically, went very smoothly today. I was able to follow along, and I could see how this is really useful, similar to what Jim has said. It has it's a great tool, and I'm trying to think how our division will use it in the future, maybe for management reports, things like that. But yeah, I think it's good.
Good. I'm glad to hear it, and I'm glad you're thinking about what's next.
Yeah, no one expects you to have much of an idea of what to use quite yet, but hopefully just keeping these things in mind, you'll be able to come up with stuff later on and ask good questions later on as to what's possible. So at the moment, so I do have a couple questions from Herbert and from Lori. I'm going to get to both of these, so thanks for waiting for those who are. If you guys do need to go, it is the end of the meeting, so feel free to hang around, ask questions, or listen to the questions being answered. I'll be here for a little while, but if you do need to go, feel free to hop off. Chris did just send that the survey that we do ask that you guys take. Doesn't take very long, but we would like to know any feedback that you guys have on the actual training itself and everything in your experience with that. So other than that, you guys are free to go, and I'm going to address Lori and Herbert's question now and any other questions that pop up. So.
Yeah, and I would like to just say a quick thank you to all you, everyone participating, showing your screen, being active, asking questions, wondering what is this, what is that, being curious. I mean, you make this a lot of fun. So it's been great working with you over the last 2 days, and I continue to look forward to working on Honolulu development and watch your system grow, and watch each one of you grow as well. So appreciate it very much. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so I'm going to, let's see, I'll address Herbert's question first because he asked it first. Herbert, you still on?
Yep, still here.
Great, okay. So I'm gonna show my screen here and we're going to take a look. So what you on one of these data sets. So all this, yeah, probably didn't bring a new report here, assuming my computer isn't totally stuck. So essentially the user ID is going to be the object ID of the user within, so in the same way that we have the job ID or the process ID, the user ID is going to be a unique